Welcome back, everybody. I'm Spoons, and thanks for joining me. Some memorable moments from Final Fantasy. I was thinking to treat this as a countdown, to make a list and kind of go with it from there, but I just kind of decided to blindly talk about this and roughly keep this video around 15 minutes. So whatever I can kind of get in there, that's what we're going to be talking about. But let's go into this and talk about some of the most memorable scenes from Final Fantasy. When it comes to Final Fantasy, there are many scenes that make some great, emotional, impactful moments, some really great story moments that add depth to each game. And with a series that spans 15 entries, it's really hard to pick a lot of different scenes. But one scene that really does come to mind for me is the scene where Red 13 first gets to meet his dad. When the party first goes to Cosmo Canyon, they go to talk to Bug and Hagen, and Bug and Hagen tells them that they need to go into this cave. So once they go into the cave, they learn about the Jai tribe, which came in and attacked Cosmo Canyon, sent a whole bunch of forces in to try and destroy the residents of Cosmo Canyon, and that there was a lone warrior who stood up and fought. Well, once you get to defeat the boss in the cavern, you move up to this top and you see a statue, or a petrified statue of what looks like to be a Red 13 character. This is, of course, where Bug and Hagen follows through the cave and says, you know, Red, this is your father. Or Nanaki, this is your father. Your father did not abandon you and your mother like you thought he did. No, he sacrificed his entire being to turn around and save Cosmo Canyon from the invading warriors that were attacking. The arrows that are sticking out of him petrified him, and this is why he has turned to stone. And it's just one of those moments in Final Fantasy VII that was, I think, was so overlooked by some other things. But it's one of those first realizations that Red had, and he found a newfound respect for his father. All of a sudden, the coward that he thought his father wasn't a coward, but in turn a true hero that not only sacrificed himself to save his wife and his son, but in turn sacrificed himself to save the entire Cosmo Canyon. And it's one of the beautifully overlooked stories in Final Fantasy that I don't feel gets enough attention. Another scene from Final Fantasy that I really don't feel like gets a lot of attention is the scene after the destruction of Clara and the party goes up onto the ship where they're flying back to Alexandria, and Beatrix is having a moment where she is questioning the orders that Queen Braun is giving her. This is one of those moments that really shines because of its that composition, Rose of May, that follows as it goes in there. I've been known just to sit there and listen to that song for 5, 10, 15 minutes just to hear that beautiful melody play out. But what we get is Beatrix really talking about, you know, is what I'm doing right? You know, Queen Braun's giving me all these orders, you know, destruction of these innocent people. You know, what she's doing, is it wrong? Why am I following her? She's really starts to question everything. And this in turn makes it so later on down the road, Zidane does say something, you know, Garnet's your queen too, or your princess too, you serve her, you need to protect her. And that kind of, that's the turning point that snaps Beatrix in, but that whole conversation that she has, just kind of her thoughts about talking through it and how she's questioning the orders that she's being given by Queen Braun, and how it kind of goes to, you know, we all have our morals at the same time, even though we're given some orders or things that we may not agree with, we still have to be ourselves. And this was an overarching theme that a lot of Final Fantasy characters really had. It was about discovering yourself and finding out where you truly belong in the world. And this was just one such scene in Final Fantasy that really stood out. Another scene from Final Fantasy that I really feel like made quite an emotional crater right at the beginning of the game was the whole scene with the Black Mages when you're flying to Lindblum. You get done with the fight with the Black Mage. You get to the part with the fight with Black Mage 2, you go onto the airship, and then the Black Mage 3 appears. The Black Mage 3 decides that he's going to, or the Black Waltz 3 decides that he's going to completely kill almost every single one of these mages on the ship that are piloting this cargo ship that's going to Lindblum. And it's there that Vivi just watches as these people that he was trying to get to learn. He was trying to learn who they were because they looked exactly like him. He wanted to know more about them. And at that point where everything just kind of starts, he starts sending these mages down, just flowing through the air, one by one, killing them all. And Vivi is just watching there, horrified. Again, this is one composition that just came through and really shined for me. This is one of those moments where you could see the sadness in Vivi's eyes without actually seeing the sadness or voicing or crying. It was all just portrayed by this look on Vivi's face as he was just horrified. And it's such a gut-wrenching scene because you really start to feel really bad for Vivi at this point. And this is kind of what sends him on his journey to try and find out more about who he is. Now let's talk about one of the most memorable moments from Final Fantasy VII, Aeris's death. Aeris's death was a very impactful moment in the game. It's one of those moments that's pretty much been ingrained into pop culture and everybody knows it. But experiencing that for the first time, watching Sephiroth leap down, plunge his sword into Aerith's stomach, and killing her, watching that materia bounce on the ground, going through the City of Ancients, only to then in turn come around and face that battle with Genova Life as Aeris theme plays, a really sad song that just hits home with that moment and how long that battle feels, to the point where the party learns much later what Aerith realized when she went to go sacrifice herself in the City of the Ancients, and what that materia, that useless materia that Aerith had, what it really did. And Final Fantasy VII wouldn't have been any better than that. It was one of those scenes where it hit home and it set up sacrifice in one of the most hardest ways that it possibly could. The next scene is actually from Final Fantasy X. There's a couple from Final Fantasy X that I really feel are good, but this one to me stands out, and I have mentioned it before in one of my other videos, but we do get to see for the very first time the destruction of Sin, or the Sin brings, when he goes off and destroys the city of Kilika, leaving the residents just in ruin as they've watched their city, their loved ones, be destroyed by this monstrosity named Sin. And how they're all worried that there's no summoner around to perform a summoning and that their loved ones are going to become fiends. This is when Yuna comes in and says that she'll do the sending. It's that sending that is just one of those moments in Final Fantasy that stand out for me. When she goes up on, starts walking on that water and then does that dance, and that big old whirlwind comes up and spirals up into the air, and she just starts dancing. The composition of the music of the Faith, Tidus's curiosity, the cinematics, the lighting, the color of the lake, the dance itself, the people crying, it brings tears to my eyes just about every time I see this scene. It is one of the most memorable moments from that game. Another moment that really stood out to me was the beginning of Final Fantasy VI. And there are plenty of moments in Final Fantasy VI that really deserve talking about, but it was that first scene of really seeing the mech suits that were piloted by Biggs, Wedge, and Terra walking into Narshe on that snowy field. And looking back at it now, the graphics aren't really that great. The graphics weren't really that great when I played it, but there's something about that scene that just compels you to go forward. I mean, imagine this much to a scene to an opening movie as you're just watching the credits go by and you see this, just kind of setting up the events of what's going to happen. And this is what happened with Final Fantasy VI. And it leaves a sense of mystery. It makes you wonder what's going on. You clearly know you're working for the enemy, but why are you working for the enemy? Why have you been tasked this particular mission to go out to Narshe and to acquire this Esper? And it all just kind of goes downhill from there. And then this is where the story starts. Terra wakes up after that battle, and it's such an amazing... Still, to this day, it's still so cool to watch that cinematic. And then to hear Terra's theme just play into the background was something really, really cool. I think another big moment for me in Final Fantasy was the opening, and the reason I say that is because 8's story was actually really, really good. And the way that the events would go on to foreshadow a lot of events that were happening within the game and kind of explain what was happening, and you'd see these events transcend and then later see these events go through the game, mixed in with that sword fight, the field, the tying it all back into the end of the game and how that played out with the little opening words there at the beginning. It was so well done. Again, one of those things that set up the adventure to come, shows you kind of what to expect, and compel you on the story with these characters. And the last scene that I want to talk about is from Final Fantasy IV. Final Fantasy IV was one of the first scenes that had a permanent character death. This was through Tella. I did feel sorry for the death of Tella, but it didn't hit me as hard as it did Aerith. In some ways, I almost feel like Tella had just kind of given up living because he wanted to be with his daughter Anna, who had passed away, or who was killed earlier on in the game, and he really didn't have a problem sacrificing himself to save the party after summoning Meteo. It was definitely a sad part in the game, but like I said, didn't have that emotional impact that it did with Aerith. And he's not the only character to sacrifice himself, though we all learned that the rest of the characters in Final Fantasy IV are just fine and dandy after they've been killed. But the scene that really stands out to me in Final Fantasy IV, and again really sets up that journey, Square Enix was on a roll with some of those opening cinematics back then. I feel like the newer Final Fantasies could take a lesson from that. But Cecil is, again, like Beatrix, going through his mind of what he is doing. He questions what's wrong. He questions why he's blindly following his king. He questions if his orders that his king is giving him are right. Why am I doing this? These people, they were peaceful. They weren't doing anything wrong. They weren't a threat to the Empire. Why was I tasked to go out and destroy them and take their crystal? And this is that scene. Right at the beginning, we get to see Cecil question his king's orders, but still blindly follow them up until the point that he decides, you know what, I'm done, I'm not going to do this anymore, and goes to rebel against his king and becomes the hero that the world needs. But it was that first initial scene of when they're flying back to Baron that sticks with me about Final Fantasy IV. There's something about just Cecil questioning himself that sets the whole story in motion. Maybe this is because, again, it's about a character trying to find his place, trying to fight against evil in the world, and questioning what's right and wrong, questioning blindly following orders from a corrupt military. And it's one of those moments in Final Fantasy that just stick, and it is so well done. These have just been some moments from Final Fantasy that I've really enjoyed. There are a whole slew more that I could talk about. Like I said, I was going to wrap this video up around about 15 minutes, so I'm just going to close this out, guys. You want to join us in Final Fantasy Week, be my guest. It's you guys can do it. Hashtag Final Fantasy. Hashtag your videos there to help us be able to keep track of those a little bit better. Watch the Power Up Mushroom and NomD's videos as well. There's a playlist on my channel that has been created specifically that has all 3 of our videos in there for your watching pleasure. You guys have been watching the Spoony Bard, and most importantly, stay happy, be happy, game happy. Spoony Bard is checking out.